Hey guys, this is Alan with a brand new episode of Devil May Play. It's been a little while and a lot has happened. So why don't we get into it? So the topic for today, it's a very popular topic in the gaming world right now, is microtransactions.
One of the best things ever.
Yeah, microtransactions, specifically loot boxes, but we can really kind of combine them into one conversation, which is just this. It's been called nickel and diming gamers because, I think we really need to think about this, each step of the way. Why are gamers so angry? And I'd like to start, if you don't mind. First of all, when you live in a world where you have Netflix, right? It is $10 a month and pretty much limitless content. Or you go to a movie theater, and people have complained about movie theater tickets. I really think $10 I'm willing to pay for a 2-hour movie. You go up to 15, 16 with IMAX 3D, people start to rankle a little bit. So there is a price point there. When you think about it, when you really seriously think about how much $60 is to some people, for some people that's a lot of money. When I was gaming hardcore or whatever, living by myself in an apartment 3 or 4 years ago, and I didn't have a ton of expenses, I would drop easily $100 a month on gaming. And you're like, you don't think about it, right? You don't think $60 is that big of a deal because you're just so used to paying it. But now the problem is $60 is a rather large investment. And yes, you can go and return a game, but you're never going to get the full credit for it. I mean, you used to be able to do the old, this game is defective, I need a new game, and then take it in without a receipt and get the $60 back. I've done that. I'm not proud of it. I've done it with a couple games and one CD. But the problem is, I really think that when people are paying money and developers are presenting their games and saying, here's what you get with our games, give us $60, you get this game. It's an investment. It is a gamble. It is a risk. We can watch every single gameplay video available for a game. We get our hands on it and we don't like it. So already, I think the relationship is definitely favorable to the developer because they have what we want, but we don't really know what it is until we get our hands on it. Now, granted, They do betas for multiplayer games, but for a lot of single player games, they don't, obviously. That just generally tends to be multiplayer games so they can stress test it and make sure it doesn't crash on launch. But my point is simply this. $60 is a lot of money. It is. And we've gotten used to paying it. And I know that with inflation, older games were more. But here's the thing. $60 is kind of the general price point for a AAA title. Okay? And so when you are asking people right off the bat to pay extra money, people don't tend to like that.
Well, see, here's the thing. I see what you're saying. And let me preface this by saying I 100% agree. But I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here.
Sure.
I see what you're saying. There's an incongruency in the market. Well, you compared it to movies or Netflix. Granted, Netflix is a subscription program, but there's still this concept that I'm getting more or less everything with the product.
Sure.
If there's anything extra, Netflix, some movies are only available on DVD. I don't know if anybody actually signs up for that, but there is some extra stuff. But there's still this sense because of the sheer amount of content that you're getting what you're paying for. You're getting a full package, and anything on top of that is just extra. I guess the closest comparison would be a video game with an expansion or with some meaty DLC. And yet, like you said, there's incongruency in between other forms of entertainment and video games. And the way I'm going to play devil's advocate is that a lot of people say, $60 actually isn't even enough to cover the cost of games. Games are getting more expensive. You mentioned inflation. And I just want to push back on my own point there because first off, when people talk about inflation, they're often looking at it in a vacuum. For example, people tend to forget that, yes, the price hasn't gone up with inflation, but more and more people are playing games now than they were 10 or 20 years ago. So this notion that I often see that publishers are poor, that they just can't afford to make a big budget game without gouging you with microtransactions. It's a completely false narrative that's really not backed up by financial records, by economics, by just the core tenets of reality. I mean, I mentioned this in an article a while ago, and Super Bunny Hop actually did a whole video on this, that the majority of American game companies are dodging taxes, for Christ's sake. and they're making millions upon millions doing that. I have a very hard time believing that they can't afford to make a $60 game at that rate. And we mentioned this before we started the podcast, but we want to dig deeper into microtransactions because everybody's talking about it. We want to talk about solutions or where the market goes. But before we get to that, I really just want to, again, push back on this idea that this is a necessity. And if it really is, if it honestly is a necessity, even though there have been AAA companies like CD Projekt Red who've proven otherwise, if it really is a necessity, then maybe that says more about your business model and your competency as a company than it does about consumers and our desire to pay or not to pay. If you can't make money in this industry without dodging taxes and nickel and diming the player, then maybe you're in the wrong business. And quite frankly, I just don't believe that's true for most of these companies we talk about and hear about. But you were saying.
No, I want to use a comparison. It may not be the best comparison, but it's one I think is kind of interesting. It's a similar entertainment industry, and that's the movie industry, right? So imagine if a film comes out and they didn't give you the full movie. Literally, I mean, they're holding back content, right? When they put out some of these DLC, especially something like Destiny when it came out. It's not microtransactions, but I'm talking about this habit of holding back content and then charging for it, right? Whatever the content might be. Even if it's just skins, it's still content, right?
In regards to like loot boxes and skins, it would be less like we're not saying that it would be like a movie withholding the ending. That would be like even worse than what a lot of games do.
No, but a movie adding different scenes, like you could buy like Lord of the Rings. Imagine, like, let's use Lord of the Rings for example. The extended editions have a shit ton of scenes, right? So Lord of the Rings comes out, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to get this scene with the mouth of Sauron? Well, it's another $5." And you're like, "Well,
it
why
would
the
also
fuck?"
be like, I think I have a really good comparison.
Sure.
Because you mentioned skins and how certain things are, and people in the gaming industry often say, "Oh, it's just cosmetic. It doesn't really matter." Well, it would kind of be like saying, "Oh, do you want music? Buy the music pack in this movie." Oh, it's just music. Movies are mostly a visual experience. You don't need it. It's not that important.
Or like
that's
I said,
what it would be like.
Music, individual scenes, whatever the case may be. If they were chopping it up and selling it like that, you'd be like, what the fuck? Why are we paying for your bad business decisions? You know, that's what it boils down to. If you put out a game, I mean, if you set goals for a game sales that are just too lofty and your developer drops the ball, or the publishers drop the ball with marketing, why is it incumbent upon the gaming audience to make up that difference?
That's basically what they're arguing, and that's what's so ridiculous. That's what people are forgetting. That's what people are leaving out in that argument.
I would rather, and a lot of people have brought this up, I would rather pay more money up front and not have to ever deal with microtransactions, especially in a freaking single player game like Shadow of War, which I'm going to get to, because there's a lot of examples of games that are doing this right now. I'd rather pay $70 or $80 when you look at the full like limited edition season pass, whatever. You're already paying that. You're paying $100 to $110. But my point is, if you can prove to me, the gamer, that this game is worth my money and it's worth $70 or $80, then do it. I would rather pay that than have to deal with all this other stuff, especially in a single player game. You know, when it comes to loot boxes and this whole cosmetics nonsense, I know there are people that argue, well, this is how developers recoup their costs, and this is that, and this is that. And I'm like, okay, another model that we could go towards, and I don't know if we would or should, but I mean, look at something like Bandcamp, right? Or when Radiohead put out one of their albums, I think, In Rainbows, right? And they allow people to pay what they want. So what if you were able to pay $60 or more? Like, they set a minimum price and say, hey guys, if you really enjoyed this game, give us a little bit of extra money, help us out as developers, and we'll do, you know, like kind of like a tipping system almost. Like, you enjoy the game, tip it.
I feel like that would be better in a world where developers didn't already destroy our trust, and where most consumers, even consumers who are apologists for this sort of thing, see them as big, giant, faceless corporations. I have trouble believing that in this world of 2017, anybody would tip Ubisoft for, even if they liked the game. Maybe. But I do see your point. Like,
my point is that why is this the only fucking paradigm that we have. You know, the
Because
opposite. We have the
because they-
opposite. We have the opposite
because
where
they-
we have a ton of indie games coming out that are like $10, $20, $30. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was a AA game that cut out the distributor to save money, and they were successful by all accounts. They sold over 100,000 copies on Steam.
Hellblade is a great example of what we're both trying to say, that this is not, you do not need to make games like this. Yes, you might need to change some things, you might need to budget better, but that's something that the gaming industry needs to do in general with these overpriced, overbloated, underdeveloped games.
I was just going to say that,
I mean,
though. That's the exact term I want to use, is bloat.
Yeah.
Think of like games like Assassin's Creed, or games like, I don't know, even Call of Duty. The amount of money they spend on stuff that really doesn't affect gameplay. Okay, for Assassin's Creed, all the history and the research that goes into it is cool, but there are so many little things that don't matter that they spend a ton of money on, and then we have to make up those costs as gamers with whatever the microtransactions DLC. I'm not using Assassin's Creed specifically, but you know, and then when you go to multiplayer games, they want to talk about like, well, you know, they've got to pay for server space for all these multiplayer matches. You've always brought up MMOs being a different breed entirely because it's constant new content. And it's not a game that is static. It's a game that's dynamic. Whether that's good or bad is a discussion for another day. But what I'm trying to say is the vanilla WoW and the WoW that's you can play now are like completely different games. They're not the same game.
And for multiplayer games, it's a bit hazier. It really comes down to this. I don't trust the gaming industry to do these things right anymore, because in a perfect world, microtransactions wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I can see, and there are some examples people bring up, that like a multiplayer focused game where they're constantly updating stuff. Yeah, I can see some sort of microtransaction system, because the average casual gamer who plays a shooter doesn't want to pay a subscription. If you're really updating stuff, if you're constantly adding new content, I can see that. But that's not often the world that we live in right now.
No, and I want to go into something else. Like we can list a ton of examples of games that have introduced microtransactions, and I'm going to do them real quickly, okay? You have Call of Duty, World War II, right? You have Shadow of War, which really hurt me because I was super excited for that game, and now I'm very much on the fence, and I really want to see if the microtransactions heavily affect the gameplay. You have Forza 7, and you have NBA 2K18, aside from things like Overwatch and Rocket League, which has had the loot box system for a while. We can talk about microtransactions, but I think you hit a point that's really important, and that is that the trust between gamers and developers, and maybe even publishers, maybe more importantly publishers, is like at an all-time low. Like the gaming industry has just been wrecked by these mobile gaming tactics, like the free-to-play bullshit that appears in stuff like Candy Crush. You know, these virtual currencies are now appearing in $60 AAA titles like NBA 2K18. We don't like it, and there's a lot of people that reject it. But my point is, there's a very toxic relationship going on right now, and developers on their end, right, if they feel like if they make any misstep, right, when it comes to releasing information about games, like I've read a couple interviews with developers saying that they're like almost afraid of gamers at this point because they get death threats and nonsense stuff like that. But I think that what I'm saying is there's a reason that there is a distrust going on. When you have a game like No Man's Sky that comes out that's advertised to be this world-ending game, and it comes out the way it is, or when you get games where it's clearly just gutted like Destiny and all the content is dished out later for over $100 and something, $170, gamers are becoming more and more risk averse, and more they're just becoming cynical. I'm just trying to wonder, I want to posit, is there any way to repair that relationship? Is there anything that can be done that you think is, I mean, I've heard people talk about the fact that when it comes to this nonsense loot box shit, like Counter-Strike Global Offensive and nonsense like that, believe it or not, the gaming industry might be headed towards some serious regulation. When you are spending money and gambling on how many, say it's a virtual currency like 2K18, say you pay $10 for the chance to win like 1,000 or 2,000 VC or whatever, or 10,000 or 100,000, and you have no idea how much you're going to get. Like that is a currency exchange. When you have content, it's a little bit more murky, but I digress. I mean, I'm moving towards the end of this conversation, which is, what do we as gamers do? If we have a game like Shadow of War, like myself, and we see these practices that I really dislike, but I really also at the same time, the core game might be amazing, and I have to either not enjoy it and not play it, or, I mean, is there any way, we've already been voicing this online, it's not like we live in a vacuum. I mean, a lot of people have been saying this for years, Jim Sterling being one, voting with your wallet is something you hear all the time, but my point is, are we punishing the wrong people by not purchasing the game? Is there any way we can, what do we do, essentially? How do we repair that bond, and can it be repaired?
I mean, I take issue with the premise of the question, though, because... Sure. It's so easy for you, me, the people in the comments of this video, and people on Reddit to believe that we're in the majority in regards to how we feel about this. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we're correct. I think we're correct. I think we are 100% factually correct about this. Some of this, I don't even regard some of these practices as opinion-based anymore. I would go as far to say this is just objectively bad business practices and bad for the industry as a whole.
For consumers,
but I mean that's what I give it. I don't give a shit about the company's well-being unless and that's kind of mean for me to say. I mean, I do care because I want more games, but if it comes between the two, I care about the consumer, so that's what I default to. But the reason why I take issue with the premise is, when you have a lot of people who are apologists for this sort of thing or just don't involve themselves enough, I mean, I don't think that there's enough of us right now to make any kind of meaningful change. And I know that sounds very cynical coming from somebody who complains about this and has been accused of crusading against this stuff and being sensationalist against this stuff. But hear me out, because I don't think I'm being cynical here.
No, all right.
I just think I'm being not even realistic, just taking a more broader, slower paced view of this. I don't think that there's going to come a point where all gamers band together and drive out the evil publishers, as much as I would love to grab a pitchfork and a torch and go after some of these people like Frankenstein. Not literally, don't sue me. But what I do think will happen is, how do I put it? Right now, people are apathetic, and there's a lot of people who don't care. There's a lot of people who apologize for this thing. And meanwhile, publishers are going deeper and deeper into this hole. They're digging it deeper and deeper. They're becoming more reliant on this stuff as an economy, on these sorts of practices. It's getting harder for them to get out of it. And I feel like if they keep going, if they keep testing us, if they keep pushing us, it's unsustainable. This is an unsustainable market they're creating, and there's nowhere it can go but downhill. Eventually, we're going to come to a point where people aren't necessarily revolting in the streets, but they're just like, man, I can't afford another game, because if I want to enjoy it, I'm going to have to, get all these microtransactions. And, I don't know what the season pass is going to look like. I don't know if it's going to be worth it. It's so complicated now. Everything is chipped away from what I want, from just enjoying the game. There's going to come a point where apathetic consumers remain apathetic, but they're also just not purchasing as many games anymore because they just don't have it in them to do it. That's the future that I see coming. I don't think the gaming industry is going to change with a bang. I think it's going to change with a whimper, a quiet whimper, as people just aren't buying as many games anymore. And maybe that's what we need. Maybe that will be the ultimate change that will be good. Maybe that will be the ultimate thing that forces these companies to either evolve or die, which is what needs to happen. They need to evolve. They need to move past this, or they need to go away. And maybe we don't need a big revolt. Maybe we don't need to band everybody together. Maybe we just, honestly, I hate to say this, maybe we just need to wait for this shit to implode.
So here's a couple thoughts. I've brought up the fact that I think, I can't speak with absolute certainty, but you look time and again at history, right? You look at EA, right? Like publishers. You look at publishers that are making some of these decisions that gamers dislike, whether it's day one DLC. Like, I really would be curious to see how many developers have suggested these practices be implemented. Like Shadow of War, that microtransaction loot box stuff was not even mentioned until like 3 or 4 months ago. Like, it was never a part of the conversation, never shown, and then all of a sudden they have this thing. And I really want to address this blatant lie that I hear from developers, which is just that, well, we make these games for people that don't have the time to play, so that if they want, they have the option to play through it quicker.
That is the biggest bullshit ever. I'm sorry, keep going. I just had to chime
but
in.
I'm saying there are literally games now that are like, that's why you have difficulty levels for one.
Right.
I played through God of War 3 on easy because I was sucked at the God of War series, and I beat it in one night, and it was a beautiful experience. But I still was able to enjoy the game. Hell, there are even games now where you can skip boss fights. Like, when you start certain games, they have a difficulty setting where it's like, enjoy the story, combat's not as hard. I've seen several games with this option for people that don't have the time to get stuck and really just want to have fun, and they don't want to necessarily have the challenge. Now, there's games like Dark Souls where you're kind of fucked. But back to your point, I don't think there's a collapse headed, and I'm not sure I articulated myself clearly enough with that last point I made about microtransactions and gambling. I think there's going to be a crackdown. When I remember when all this CSGO bullshit was going on last year, the amount of money people were spending, kids were stealing credit cards.
Fuck yeah.
And I'm like, it is only a matter of time before Congress comes in. Like, my point is, if the gaming industry cannot get their shit under control, Congress is going to get their shit under control, and it's going to be terrible because Congress doesn't know anything about technology. So they're going to come in and just make some stupid bullshit laws, and they're going to hurt everyone, all gamers and all developers. You know what I'm saying? I think it's kind of like, do you want the government to step in, or do you want, as developers and as a community, to step in and say, ho, we need to slow down on this stuff, because we are moving towards just straight up gambling practices. And what's sad about that is, what I want to put out here is that these games with these practices, especially something like 2K18 or Forza 7, these games are not made for video game enthusiasts. These games are made for fucking whales, for people with deep pockets that are going to spend thousands of dollars on a single game because they can. That's what that system is for. Don't tell me it's optional. When you put that system in, you have irrevocably changed the DNA of your game, and you are now catering towards a very, very specific set of people, and that is towards gamblers. And yes, there may be the main game for the rest of us, but you are basically saying, you know what? Fuck you. We've been doing this for a long time. We used to have cheat codes so you could unlock stuff. We used to allow you to have XP to unlock stuff. Now we're going to make you pay for the chance to possibly unlock stuff. And I'm like, no. Basically, what I foresee is that you're going to have a splitting of audiences, and it's kind of a good thing, because we've already seen some games do this, where they step into that middle space, like Hellblade, where it's not quite AAA. You're going to see more studios like that, and the studios that don't do this, like CD Projekt Red, even Titanfall 2, which, even though that's EA, that was a game that was very upfront about the DLC and very like forthcoming and very honest about it. I just see the gaming population splitting, and I don't want to use the term gamer bro, but I think you're, like you said, you have the apathetic folks, the folks that buy 1 or 2 games a year, and those are the people that are going to sink hundreds of dollars into those games. So if it's like sports games like Madden or FIFA or 2K18 or whatever, and these developers keep getting away with what they want to, they're just going to spend boatloads of money on that. And like you said, they're not going to have money for anything else. They're going to have their couple games a year they buy, and then there's going to be the rest of us that are like, I'm good. And we spend the money on, it's like more of a segmentation of the gaming audience, if that makes sense. Because you already have like different genre fans, but I'm saying when it comes to like your target audience, it's just going to get more segmented. That's all. That's really what I foresee. Sorry, that was a long rant,
No. I went on for like an hour. I would say, in regards to what you said about Congress, under almost any other circumstance, I would agree, because our Congress is made up of a bunch of old, stupid trash people. But not that I have faith in them on this issue, but this is so simple. I can't even see them fucking this up. Like if this was in the early 2000s when
the internet was tubes.
or that, and when both Democrats and Republicans were going after video games, then I would say, oh shit, yeah, we want them to stay as far away from this shit as possible because they're already looking to shut these things down. But nowadays, I think it would just be as simple as saying, this is gambling. These things are ostensibly for kids, at least a lot of them are, based on like, you can rate it whatever you want, but you're marketing it to children. And end of story. You can't do that anymore. I mean, maybe I'm naive for thinking that, but also worth noting, I don't think there are that many game companies lobbying Congress right now. So they really have no reason to fuck this up or do anything but fix the problem. And yeah, maybe I'm being naive. Like if we were talking about, which we're probably going to talk about in another episode, about YouTube and, you know, regulations that'll be necessary on there, that I'm terrified of, because they will turn the internet into cable, and we cannot have that happen. But this, even as paranoid and cynical towards like anybody in charge as I can be, I don't think it would be that bad. I, for once in my life, kind of welcome
our overlords,
the government coming in and slapping some of these publishers in the face.
That's funny. Well, so here's my final point, my moral dilemma. Do I buy Shadow War? Because I've been looking forward to this game for so long, and so like I have a couple different options. You know, I can either not buy the game at all. I can buy the game used and not make sure none of the money goes to the publisher or the developer. Or I can buy it, not use any microtransactions, or I can buy it and use microtransactions. But my point is, and I know you're right, I think we as people have a tendency to want to humanize these things. Like you said, these are companies, they're designed to make money. You know, they might be passionate people, but at the end of the day, they're just trying to make a buck. But my point is, I'm sure there's a lot of talented people that worked on that game that were just as disappointed when they found out about microtransactions being put in the game as we were, maybe even more so. Because just imagine, imagine this is your baby you've been working on for years, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, by the way, guys, we're going to throw this in there. You're like, what the fuck? So, and then of course they have to put their own spin on it. So my point is, you know, like you said, it's not like we can rally together, but it's almost like we need like a gamer advocacy group, even though there's already like people kind of doing that. Like you say, we need lobbyists, or like there's no video game companies lobbying anybody, but it's almost like we should get a lobby group.
Yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't saying there should be game companies lobbying Congress. I was saying that there aren't, so I don't think that they would be on the publisher's side. But you're about to say we should try and lobby Congress.
No, not necessarily lobby Congress. Just kind of like create like I don't know. There probably already is advocacy groups, but just basically like how are you, almost like not an ESRB, but like I don't know. Like I
see what you're saying, but like
something beyond that.
The problem is still like organization, getting people in one. Bringing gamers together and assuming that
who you should go
agree
after
enough.
You go after like talk to like the 1 Million Moms groups or whatever, the parents groups, and be like, hey, did you know this game has gambling in it? And the parents will like freak the shit out. Like that's all you got to do. Be like, hey, did you hear the new Call of Duty has gambling in it? And they're like, oh my god, I can't buy little 9-year-old Timmy this, because we all already know that fucking M for mature doesn't give a shit. But if you start saying, hey, they're probably going to steal your credit card, like, and then use it to buy in-game items, they'll be like, oh my god, maybe I should.
I'm not going to lie though. I'm more afraid of dumb moms who don't understand video games than I am of Congress.
That's true. But that's what I'm saying. We can use, and not just moms. Let's not be sexist here. There's probably a bunch of old dads that don't know either.
I'm more afraid of parents reigniting the video game scare, which will then encourage the old trash people in Congress to overreact again, than I am just Congress itself looking at this in a rare but logical fashion.
I mean, that's a very long stretch. I don't know.
I don't know if it's
possible, but you get what I'm saying. It will eventually catch up, And like I said, what I think is going to happen is that you're just going to have a segmentation, and you're going to have a little bit of a dip. And what you're going to have, maybe it's what's going to happen with what has happened with the movie industry, where you have like these big blockbuster films. We've already talked about how we like Marvel, but I'm just trying to compare. Like, you're going to have these big blockbuster games and then nothing in between, and then like indie titles. Like, yes, you have a smattering of good mid-budget movies now, but not nearly as much as there used to be. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, is you're going to have the games that were kind of more modest sized, that didn't have these practices, probably going away. I don't know. Possibly. It's all conjecture.
That already happened, though. What you just said already happened. Remember THQ? Remember all the AA things? But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Lark. Which again, I want to end this on a more optimistic note.
Please do.
They're coming back. You brought up Hellblade. Mm-hmm. I mean, that game would not have existed 2 years ago, and Jim Sterling said this in a video a couple weeks ago about how it's games like that kind of prove that this isn't the way things have to be done. Sure. And that's something that I try to stress a lot too. It doesn't have to be this way.
You're right.
It's not that games can't afford to exist without these shitty practices.
We need a publisher that goes after these types of games, because here, to make a corollary and a positive note, I was just reading an article about how Netflix has been going around picking up films that have been sitting around Hollywood forever because they couldn't find the budget, because they were too risky or they weren't big enough, or you know what I mean? Like, they go after.
You're basically describing Devolver Digital.
What do they do?
The people who published Hotline Miami. They make some of those. They make some Serious Sam. Oh yeah, you don't know that much about Hotline Miami.
No, you talked about it, though. But my point is, like,
for you and for anybody else listening, Devolver Digital, they're kind of what Lark was just describing with Netflix. They often take like smaller games that other people wouldn't have given a chance, things that are really offbeat, weird, either humorous or really dark in a certain way, and they give them a chance.
Okay. Well, awesome. You know what we should do? We should keep an eye on that, and maybe do some talk about that a little bit and put some exposure towards that, because I feel like there's a lot of negativity right now, and I want to focus on the companies that are doing it right. Like, we've focused enough on the companies that are fucking up. We know we know these practices suck. Like, most of us are in agreement. Like you said, there's a few people that aren't, but most of the people that are talking about this, that are aware of this, are not on board with the changes that are being made for the most part. So instead, we should be making sure we're supporting companies and developers and people that are treating gamers with respect, instead of just trying to get their money. But anyways, positive notes.
I think we have an idea for the next episode.
What's that? Our positive
notes?
Literally.
Oh my God, that's what we're going to call it.
Positive notes.
Wow, we came up with the episode before we even made it. Awesome.
That's how good we are. Well, on that note, that positive note, take us out.
Oh, we're stupid. Well, yeah, guys. So that was Devil May Play. We've been gone for a minute, but now we're back. Expect episodes, I would say, every other week. That's what we're going to try and aim for, because I am a lazy bastard and Lark has a child. And so, I mean, we both have a lot on our plate. Me, I have a lot of just air and nothingness on my plate. Lark has an actual small, tiny human being.
It sounds like I'm gonna eat him. All right.
On that note,
I'll
see you guys later.
Bye.